Hello and welcome back to the Quiet Riot. If you are new here, I'm Ainsley, and this is where we dive a little deeper into film, television, and media. Today I'm so excited to talk to you about one of my favorite films, and one that some today may consider controversial. After all, it was pretty controversial at the time that it was released as well, because we are talking about a relationship that occurs between a man of about 20 and a woman who's about to be 80 years old. But the thing about this movie is that it manages to treat this relationship with the utmost respect and understanding, and isn't overtly sexualized, and it isn't made to be controversial for the sake of being controversial. This relationship, as well as the film as a whole, is meant to teach us a little something, and in the end, it does just that. Today, I want to discuss the film as a whole, give you a little bit of the history, and dive a little deeper into why Harold and Maude works. A young man who's obsessed with death and a nearly 80-year-old woman whose philosophy on life is to live life to the fullest meet and fall in love in this dark romantic comedy. Originally critically panned, Harold and Maude became a cult classic that takes a look at our relationship to life and death. It's easy to look down on a film with a 60-year age gap between its romantic leads, but the film is more than a romance. It's a story of life and how to live it, of death and how to say goodbye, and love and how to accept it. Harold and Maude took a huge swing, and while it may have missed initially, the film has gone on to be loved by audiences and critics alike. An unlikely romance that makes audiences laugh, cry, and think a little deeper about life and death. Harold, played by Bud Cort, is a 20-year-old man who lives a life of luxury with his overbearing mother. She attempts to set him up on dates, but they don't exactly go well. After all, Harold isn't your typical 20-year-old. He is obsessed with death, and he goes to funerals for funsies. He also happens to stage these elaborate death scenes in order to get a reaction out of his mother, and she certainly has varying degree of reactions throughout the film. Something that I genuinely like about this aspect of who Harold is that he is in this very transitional period in his life, and I think for him, this obsession with death he hasn't really been able to grab onto anything that truly means something to him, and on the basis of the way that his mother treats him, he has been given everything, but it was never anything that he really wanted. It was all for the look of it and the way in which other people would perceive them. There's an instant connection between the two, and one that eventually develops into something more. It's not easy to describe this film without causing the person that you're telling this film about to absolutely cringe and pass an unfair judgment on it. The movie can easily be misunderstood before watching it, but once you watch it, you'll understand why so many people has fell in love with it over the years. When my dad first told me about this film, I made a face that can only be described as disgust, but luckily I didn't let that deter me from actually watching the film, because when I did, I immediately fell in love with it. I enjoyed the characters of both Harold and Maude, the supporting characters, and the way in which this movie was executed. There's so many details that bring this movie to life, that bring the script to life, that create a world in which the relationship between Harold and Maude are believable, but it also leaves a enduring mark on us, the audience. I laughed and cried as the story unfolded and the relationship between Harold and Maude developed. The movie itself could easily become exploitative towards both its characters, but Harold and Maude paints a picture of two souls that come together because they were meant to. If you haven't watched Harold and Maude yet, where you can watch it will be in the description box below. I highly recommend going in and seeing it before you get spoiled by this video. It is absolutely hilarious. It also has some cute little shocking moments to it, and the overall narrative of the film sends you on a journey. It's not exploitative, it's not over the top in the way that it deals with the relationship between Harold and Maude, and their not only their relationships but also their stories of as individuals, but it is a dark comedy, so it has some enjoyable little moments beyond just the 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 philosophical notions that this film presents us with.
Change into a sunflower, most of all. They're so tall and simple. What flower would you like to be?
The script tells us that Harold is a man of about 20, while the novelization of the film says that Harold is almost 20. Either way, Harold is at a transitional moment of his life, entering adulthood and latching onto his disturbed fantasies about death. He lives with his mother, who arranges dates for him, believing that it is time for him to find a woman and settle down. He's 20. Drowning in the expectations of his mother, Harold acts out. She cares more about what others think than of what is going on with her son. Some of the things that people have mentioned in their critical assessments of the movie is the way in which Harold carries himself, and the way that he, a selfish individual, because of the way that he presents these while he arranges these suicides, these fake suicide attempts, and I think we forget that who he is in relation to his mother and in relation to the life that he's expected to live. And I do see him creating these suicide attempts, or creating these fake suicide attempts, as his way of trying to seek some kind of attention from his mother that is not simply wanting him to get married or wanting him to present himself in a certain way.
What?
Harold and maybe you seem to think that her choice to depart this existence came out of nowhere, but the writers were sure to let us know exactly where Maude was, what she was thinking. It is a clever bit of foreshadowing during their first meeting.
Hey, Maiden, I heard he's 80 years old. I'll be 80 next week. Good time to move on, don't you think?
This was the first time, but not the last time, that Maude would mention her plans without saying it directly. The decision to go about telling the story this way allows the audience to step inside the shoes of Harold and learn about life from Maude the way that he does. When the story comes to its end, we are met with more than tragedy. We are met with triumph. Harold is no longer the sad young man he was, who delighted in staging elaborate suicides. He became a man who was thrilled with the possibilities that life had in store. He was ready to move forward and live the life that Maude would be proud of. It would be an oversimplification to refer to Maude as a manic pixie dream girl, but I do see some people interpreting the character that way. But she is more than somebody who is here to just simply impart wisdom or fix Harold. She's also not here just to fix the audience, but she is here to tell a story of a life well lived. And there's a moment in the film that is a subtle realization that Maude was a victim of anti-Semitism. She was in an internment camp, and it's such a subtle moment because it's when she's with Harold and he notices the tattoo on her arm. And this is a great moment that allows us to see who Maude is, and that she's so much more than just this woman on the verge of turning 80 who is a widow and who just lives life to the fullest. And of course, these are important attributes of the character. This is an important part of her history, but we also get to know that there are multiple things that have happened in her life that have led to this moment. And especially as a woman of 35 now, there are moments, I look back and I think at 35 years old, it can be so easy in this life to see yourself as being old, but there's still so much life for me to live. And a character like Maude in a movie like Harold and Maude allows me to learn so much more about life, but also so much more about myself. And I believe this is one of the reasons why the film didn't necessarily do well at first, but it didn't take much time at all for the film to find an audience and to really pull at the heartstrings and grab onto people who were in need of the stories of both Harold and Maude and their relationship, as well as who they are as individuals. Screenwriter Colin Higgins wrote the original 20-minute script for this film school thesis at UCLA Film School. He originally imagined Harold and Maude as a short film. When Higgins worked for film producer Edward Lewis by performing light duties, including driving his daughter to work, he told her about the film, and she ended up mentioning it to her mother. The daughter ended up telling her mother, Mildred Lewis, who then told Higgins, "Don't write this as a short film. This is a feature. Go write this as a real movie." While a lot can be said in a short film, I do think that this film needed that build up. And we spend a lot of time with Harold outside his time with Maude, and this softens the relationship and helps us to understand why and how it happens, and why Harold is attracted to her and her importance in his life, but in this life. Edward Lewis gave the script to Stanley Jaffe at Paramount. Lewis said in a 1974 New York Times article, "Paramount was the first and only studio I gave the script." Before I learn more about this movie and how it got made, I would ask the question, how did the pitching of this film go? Because I can't imagine sitting there in a round table of a bunch of men and pitching this script and questioning what the reactions would be. A big basis of this, of course, from the title, is the relationship that occurs between Harold and Maude, and it can be boiled down to something that's not as entertaining or doesn't have the same kind of importance that it ends up having. So I was really interested to finding out how it actually happened. But it does make sense that this was something that happened organically, with just one person telling another, who told another, who told another, who then ended up taking that script and introducing it to the studio. Higgins originally sold the script with the intent to direct the film himself. When the test shots he did were not satisfactory to studio heads, the film was given to Harold Ashby, who would only direct the film with Higgins' blessing. Ashby took him on as co-producer so Higgins could watch and learn from him on set. I really like this. I think one of the best ways to learn is to be able to shadow somebody, and for him, he was able to be there and see the film be made, and he played a part on bringing this film to life beyond its script. When casting the film, Ashby was sure that he wanted to cast a European actress in the part of Maude. Head of production at Paramount, Bob Evans, set up a meeting between Ashby and American actress Ruth Gordon. During their meeting, it didn't click, or so he thought. But as he said, "Kept drawing myself back to the feeling of a role should be played by an American." He then called and asked Ruth Gordon for a second meeting, this time in her Hollywood home. "Now I was sure the part was mine," says Ruth Gordon. After half an hour of polite conversation, Ashby left without making any commitment. The hell with him in spades, she thought. In his cautious way, Ashby eventually decided that Ruth Gordon would be the best Maude. The character was there in her optimism, her energy. The film was then shot in and around San Francisco and San Mateo, California. One of the selling points for this film for me was Ruth Gordon. Not only having watched this film, but also just that in general. I can't imagine that I may have not given this film the time of day, at least when I did, maybe when I got older. But Ruth Gordon is such she's a great actress, but she has this incredible energy that really brings her characters to life and gives them something so much more interesting than what may be there in the first place. The first time that I saw her, I believe it was in Rosemary's Baby, and even though she plays somebody who's not like a good person in that, the optimism that he talks about here still breathes through in that character. She has this very specific energy and this delight that you can understand how she gets into people's life, whether it's good, such as in Rosemary's Baby, or bad, such as in Rosemary's Baby, or good with Harold and Maude. When the film was initially released, it underperformed at the box office, and it was critically panned. Ebert gave the film 1.5 out of 4 stars, stating, "And so what we get, finally, is a movie of attitudes. Harold is death, Maude is life, and they managed to make the two seem so similar that life's hardly worth the extra bother. The visual style makes everyone look fresh from the wax museum, and all the movie lacks is a lot of day-old gardenias and lilies and roses in the lobby, filling the place with a cloying, sweet smell. Nothing more to report today. Harold doesn't even make pallbearers." Ebert is obviously a really good critic. He was really good at his job, and I have come to realize that there are times when I and I'm sure many of you too, reading anything that he said maybe about your favorite films, that there are times when we absolutely agree with each other, but then there are times, like when it comes to Harold and Maude, that I don't understand where he's coming from with this. Where the film is visually is one of the things that makes it an interesting watch, because the world that we're living in and the things that we see gives us some extra insight into the characters of Harold and Maude. And I do find that Harold and Maude have a lot of differences, because he is somebody who's quite obsessed with death, and they look at death in a very different way. She looks at it as this new chapter, and he looks at it in the beginning as like it's an end to something. And maybe that's just something that Roger Ebert didn't get, but I have to say this is one of those times where I definitely disagree with him. Vincent Candy of the New York Times said of the film, "Are so aggressive, so creepy, and off-putting that Harold and Maude are obviously made for each other, a point the movie itself refuses to recognize, with the twist ending that betrays, I think, its life-affirming pretension." Another another critique that I definitely disagree with. I think this at the end, like I said before when referring to Ebert's interview, that Maude's choice here is her closing this chapter on her book and her making the decision in her old age that it is time for me to move on. Like, she is somebody who wants to continue to be able to live life, and she's come to that point at 80 years old where she feels like this is where it needs to end, and she's not someone who wants to be taken care of. She maybe doesn't mind being helped out, maybe doesn't even mind being taken care of, but she doesn't want to lose the things that she does. She doesn't want to lose that. And I do understand how maybe the initial reaction, like it was for Candy here, could seem as if she's maybe thinking, and for me as well, that if she has to, have a cane or a wheelchair or any of those things, that takes away her lust for life or her ability to be able to do some of the things that she does. And maybe in life there would be adjustments that she need to make. But I think more so than anything, it is just, there are so many moments in her life where somebody else had to make a decision for her, and they made a decision for her. Something happened that changed her life drastically. The Holocaust, her husband's passing, and this is that one time where she's able to have complete control over what happens. And Maude is not somebody who allows other people to make those decisions for her, at least not anymore. The ending, as in the way that he did, as it betrays those life-affirming pretensions. But I do think how we see Harold at the end of this movie, he continues to live life, and he is going to go out and love some more and enjoy life, and he is going to take what he learned from Maude and implement that into his life. The film quickly found a cult following, and there were 1,957 showings from mid-1972 until June 1974 at the Westgate Theater in Adida, Minnesota. On the one-year anniversary of the film showing, Ruth Gordon showed up, and the following year she was joined by Bud Cort. In spite of the film's lackluster box office performance and their bad reviews from critics, Harold and Maude became a classic in its own right. It made up financially thanks to the long runs in Montreal, which was 112 weeks, Detroit 72 weeks, and in Paris for 2 years. Since its original release, critics have reappraised the film, looking at it more favorably. Mark Caro of the Chicago Tribune said in a 2017 review, "I'm sorry, Harold and Maude, for denying you for so long. You're my favorite movie once again." Following the film's release, Colin Higgins released a novelization that differs from the film. There was a play adaptation that ran for years in France and has since been produced elsewhere. In France, there was also a TV series based on the film that was aired in 1978. In 1974, Ruth Gordon was quoted as saying in the New York Times, I can walk down the streets of any city, including Edgartown on Martha's Vineyard, and people hand me oat straw tea, a symbol in the movie. Boxes of chocolates, photographs of their city, and daisies, daisies, daisies. 2 men and 2 girls brought a floral set piece of 12 dozen daisies to my hotel in Dayton, Ohio, to show me what it meant to have Harold and Maude in Dayton. At 7:30 a.m., a middle-aged man stopped me to say that he had especially admired Harold and Maude. He was a vice president of National Cash Register. At lunchtime, the waitress said, "Your check has been paid." The gentleman said to tell you he saw Harold and Maude. A lot of people saw the film. There were many of the film's audiences that saw the film more than once. The philosophy of the film kept them coming back for more. Colin Higgins is quoted as saying, "We're all Harold, and we all want to be Maude. We're all repressed and trying to be free, to be ourselves, to be vitally interested in living, to be everything we want. Remember, you are not a field of daisies. You are one daisy in a field full of others that may appear to look just like you, but when you look a little closer, they are all different. Don't let yourself blend in. Be like Maude and stand out of the crowd with dignity and conviction. Make an ass out of yourself, and don't let the world judge you too much." Harold and Maude has become one of my favorite films, and I recently watched it for the first time in a long time, and it seems as if every time I watch it, it's like watching it again for the first time. There is something that I realize that I never did before. There's a feeling I had that I hadn't had before, and I think that this movie, at the different ages that you watch it, have learned something from Maude, and that is to keep on living. Find the things in life that you love and do it. Try new things and recognize that nothing is quite as it seems. This life is full of so many things that are completely out of our control. We can find things that mean something to us, and we can do those things. And I'm not saying once you turn 80 to go and do what Maude did, no. But I do think that we could all use a little more appreciation for this thing we call life. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen to me dive a little deeper into Harold and Maude. If you made it to this point and you haven't seen the film before, please do. The fact that you got spoiled doesn't really matter, even though I wish you didn't know how it ended, but I still think you should go and watch this film, and I would like to know what you got out of it. What is something that you learned, something that you've thought of that you never did before? What do you think of Harold? What do you think of Maude? Do you relate to either of these characters? I would love to know your thoughts on this wonderful film, and even if our thoughts differ, I'd still like to hear about them. Thank you for sticking around, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. If you like this video, give it a like, and I hope to see you again on a different one. Bye.